Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head away from the library and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely January 3rd here in suburban Chicago. The weather is brisk but very pleasant, and I'm walking home from the library. I walked to the library while I was recording my last episode. Now I'm walking home from the library. Huzzah. So today I thought I would tell you about a couple games I've played recently. These are games that I haven't played enough to be able to give a good review to, but rather games I've played just enough to give you a hint, a soupçon of an idea of what the game is like. That's right. It's time for another fast reaction review episode. It's Shootin from the Hip, Triple Shot. So in today's episode, I am going to be talking about 3 games that I've played once each, or in a couple of cases twice, but generally just a couple times. And so this isn't an in-depth review. It is first reactions. In other words, I'm shooting from the hip. The first game is from Hometown Heroes R2I Games. This is Andrew Nerger and Jeff Chin, a couple of game designers running an independent publishing house in the Chicago area. I know these fellas from my board game club. They came with some frequency to that event, and so I know them a little bit because of that. They also designed and produced Crypt, which is a game I've talked about before. And now I'm going to talk about Canvas, their latest publication. Now, Jeff and Andrew really specialize in nicely produced, very lightweight games. Like, they want a game that takes a half an hour or less, generally has one interesting mechanism and a few interesting choices, but is something you could play while chit-chatting with friends and that will look very nice on your table. With Canvas, their approach was to make a beautiful object and make it so that you could enjoy it in your home. They actually put a little hanging hole in the back of the game so you could hang it up on the wall if you wanted. And the game uses a sliding box that goes through the top, so you could hang it on your wall if you want to. I don't think I'm going to, but there it is. Canvas is built around the idea of using transparent cards layered on top of one another to score a variety of scoring conditions. In the game, you are painters, and your goal is to paint 3 paintings that will score you as many points as you can. There are, I think, 5 scoring conditions, maybe 3, either 3 or 5, that will score points in a variety of different ways. Each painting can score for each objective, and when it does, you get a little ribbon. And at the end of the game, you get points for the different ribbons that you have. That's basically it. It's pretty simple. The primary mechanism is card drafting and set collection. So you have a river of cards that you're drawing from that will contribute in various ways to the sets that you're trying to collect. And then those sets will help you score the scoring conditions on the various objective cards. So that makes the game sound pretty dry. The thing is, it is a lovely, lovely game. Part of the fun of it is how nice it looks. The way the game plays, these cards that you're scoring are all on clear acetate, kind of like the cards in the game Gloom or the cards in the game Mystic Vale. And the game comes with a bunch of sleeves, and then there are these background cards that give you a kind of abstract painted background. So the idea is you put the painted background in, and then you add these different cards and you slide them into the sleeve, so you make a painting with these different painted elements added to the card. And part of the fun of it is that the different cards will often have overlapping things that they contribute to the set. And so when you put the card in, you put it on top of, or you have to decide the order that you're going to put the element cards into the painting. And so inevitably you're going to be covering up things. And so deciding on the stacking order for those cards is a crucial part of it. You're only allowed to have 5 cards in hand. And once you have 5 cards in hand, you have to make a painting. And the painting always uses 3 cards. So you'll have 2 left over, and then you draft up to 3 more before you make another painting. On one hand, it feels a little bit like a race game, but there's no bonus for finishing early. It takes between 9 and 11 turns to make your 3 paintings. And you're drafting paintings from the row of the market, and it uses a kind of standard river format where the cards slide down toward the end, and when you choose to skip a card on the market row, you have to pay these little inspiration tokens. You start the game with 4 of them, and the only way you get more is by taking cards that have inspiration tokens on them. So I guess a conservative player might be able to hold off spending them and starve the market of these cards and force your opponents to take cards they don't want. I don't suspect that would be a good strategy, but this is a really light entry-level game with beautiful components and a really high conversation value, by which I mean you can chit-chat while you're playing it quite enjoyably. I went in for the deluxe edition, so I got little wooden easels to put our paintings on and little acrylic tokens instead of cardboard. I don't think you need to do that, but like I said, I know these guys and I wanted to help them out, so I was happy to spring for the slightly nicer edition. I think the regular edition of this game would be just fine. You don't need the acrylic tokens. The cardboard ones would work fine. Overall, Canvas is a nice experience. Like I said, very light, and so keep that in mind if you're looking at it, that it is definitely a filler weight game, which is also true of Crypt. So that's Canvas from Road to Infamy. Next up is a game I've been anticipating for quite a long time. This is Beez, designed by Dan Halstead, published by Next Move Games. Next Move is a publishing arm the publishing company that made games like Azul and its spin-offs and Reef. They specialize in medium weight, very thinky games with beautiful production. And they certainly hit that nail on the head with Beez. Beez is spelled B-E-E-Z, by the way, if you're looking for it. There is another game spelled B-E-E-E-S apostrophe, or exclamation point. That is a different game. This is B-E-E-Z. In Beez, you are a bee collecting nectar for your hive, trying to arrange the nectar on the hive. The gimmick of the game is that you have this hex board with all these flowers on it, and each flower has a different kind of nectar that you gain when you land on a particular space. So your goal is to map a route for your bee to collect nectar that will let you score points using a variety of scoring conditions. But the challenge in Beez is manipulating the board state to fit your advantage, because you have incredibly limited choices based on your bee. Each bee sits on a little plastic hex that has numbers on it. In front, there's a little circle with a line through it indicating no movement that way. Then to the side, you have 1 or 5, then 2 or 4, and directly behind the bee, you have 3. The idea is, whatever direction you want to move, you have to go that many spaces straight based on the number facing that way. So your bee is going to take this kind of circuitous wandering route through the board. When you land, if you're landing next to one of those nectar tokens, you can take it and place it in your hive. Then on your next turn, you do that again. It goes until somebody has collected 12 nectars. When that happens, everybody, you finish the round. So it's one of those games where you have an even number of turns, and then the game is over. The tricky part is, when you put your nectar in your hive, you have to put it in the row that matches the number that you moved. So if you moved 4 spaces this turn, your nectar has to go in one of the rows labeled 4 or 5. So there's a 1 row in the middle, there's a 2-3 row on either side of that, and a 4-5 row on top or bottom. So not only do you have to manipulate your bee so that you land on the nectar that you want, you also have to do it so that you land on the nectar you want using the number of moves that you want in order to put the nectar in the right spot on the honeycomb. That's the version we tried. And then, like I said, there's 3 public scoring objectives, and each person has 2 private scoring objectives as well. At the end of the game, you score all 5 objectives. And these objectives are everything from points for each nectar of a certain color that you take, to points for the arrangement of the nectar pieces in your honeycomb, to, what's the third kind of thing, to a different kind of arrangement. So it's like, how did you fill your nectar? How did you arrange the nectar pieces, like arrangements of colors? And then how many of a color did you take? Those are the 3 kinds of scoring objectives. Challenge of the game, obviously, is to get your bee to land in the right spot using the right move so you can take the nectar and put it in the spot you want. If you play the expert variant, which it's recommended you do once you've played a few times, then on top of all that, you also have to put your nectar next to another piece of nectar that you took. Beez is remarkably tricky in terms of the level of depth to the level of play. or the seeming level of depth to the level of depth you actually experience. Our first game we played it took like 15 minutes. And my wife and I are like, is this game really supposed to be this short? And we looked and we scored hardly anything, because the trick of the game is that you need to take not just any nectar you can get to. You have to take specific nectar in a specific pattern in order to score lots of points. But it's a race game. The first person to take 12 nectar is going to win. So it becomes very puzzly very fast. And if you add in the requirement that all your nectar need to be adjacent to each other, I can see how it will be a real brain burner. And I think once we've played a few times, this is going to go in as something I really enjoy. Congratulations to Dan Halstead, somebody I've met once. He was one of the co-hosts of the podcast of Nonsensical Gamers, and I did get a chance to play Baron Park and Dungeon Pets with him at Origins 2017 with him and my daughter. So congratulations, Dan. This is great. I'm looking forward to playing it more and finding the depth of it. Also, one last thing about that game, the little bee pieces that you have are absolutely cute and should definitely be something you give a try if you get a chance. So that's Beez from designer Dan Halstead and Next Move Games. The third game I want to talk about today is one I have been dying to play. This is one I've been excited about since I heard about it maybe last August. I was so excited about it, I had a little squee fest here on the podcast about a week ago when I picked it up. This is Praga Caput Regni, which I believe means Praga, City of the King, or Praga, Capital of the Kingdom, which, as Jamie pointed out on the Secret Cabal podcast, would have been a better name, because English players in English could have found it better. But I think that right now the board game community does not really welcome games with different names based on different languages. I don't know. Like if you want a game to be easily searchable on Board Game Geek, you have to just use one name for it. But I know that there are games that have a different name in German than they have in English. Well, anyway, this is the latest game from Vladimir Suchy. I've talked about it a number of times. It is definitely on the heavier end, really crunchy, thinky, economic game. Reminds me a bit of Underwater Cities in that it involves making choices and building a variety of different things, which then give you different powers and bonuses. It reminds me of Shipyard in that it has this sort of augmented powers that you can get. In Shipyard, you have these different actions you can take, and you can take these bonus tiles that will make the actions more powerful as the game progresses. Like Underwater Cities, it has a board that you're building on, although more like Terraforming Mars, it uses a central board that everybody builds some things on, and then you have your individual engine that you build some things on. The central mechanism is this really interesting choice wheel. It's sort of like a rondelle, but no, that's not really the best. Anyway, it's this rotating wheel with these tiles that slot into it, and on your turn you can pick one of the tiles on the wheel. Some of the tiles will be free or will even give you points if you take them. Other tiles cost money. They cost gold to take. And this is a game of incredibly tight resources, so spending gold to take a tile is a significant choice every time. When you take a tile, it has two of the basic actions on it. You can pick which one of those you want to take. And then you get a bonus as well based on where in the wheel the tile was sitting. When you take the action, it allows you to do things like adding tiles to the board, upgrading your actions, getting resources in various ways, increasing your resource capability. So I guess you have a stone mine and you have a gold mine. And when you increase one of those, then I guess one of them's income and one of them's ore. When you increase one of those, you could either take whatever your mines produce, or you could just take one of that resource and then increase your production capability so that next time you take that action, you get more. It's a delicious choice. There are a bunch of different ways to score points. There is a progress track that runs up the middle of the board that will give you sort of cascading bonuses that, again, help make you more efficient and allow you to do other things. Most importantly, there are a number of choices that allow you to acquire these windows. I don't know why they're windows, but you can read about that. Actually, Prague has a long history of people being thrown out windows. I should see if that's why he went with that. If you look in the back of the rule book, there's a bunch of stuff about the history of Prague. But if you acquire a silver window and a gold window, you can spend those two to take an extra action on your turn. So instead of taking one action, you get two. Now, you do this several times, and you've built up quite a significant advantage for yourself. The game takes place over a limited number of rounds. I think if you never take any extra actions, you'll get 16 turns or 16 actions, which doesn't sound like very much and frankly isn't. But you're able to get a lot done during that time, especially if you're good at coordinating among the different things you can do and really pushing it in terms of maximizing your bonuses. Now, I've only played this once and I played it solo. So my experience of it is really colored by the play mode that I chose. I like it quite a bit. On first play, it did not give me the same excitement that I got out of Underwater Cities or Last Will, or Underwater Cities, Last Will, or Pulsar 2849. If I had to right now put it somewhere in the list, I would probably put it fourth in his list of games after those other three. But I think that is an early judgment that's not going to stand. I think as I play this more, I'm going to discover some of the synergies, and then I'm going to really hit that groove of finding a way to get a thing that gets me one more thing, the really exciting payoff chain that I suspect will be there once I've pushed on the game a little bit. So on my first play, it's not quite as amazing as I was hoping it would be, but I can tell there's a lot there, and I suspect on future plays, my opinion of it is only going to rise. Now, as a downside, it is very complicated, which isn't a downside for me, but for other people thinking about playing it, especially if you aren't somebody who likes really complicated games, there is a whole heck of a lot going on. I originally thought since my wife and I had been to Prague, she might enjoy trying this. By the time I read the rules and played one solo game of it, I was like, nope, I'm not showing her this again, because it was a little too much. The theme works pretty well for me. I mean, the actions are kind of generic economic actions, but the use of really interesting artwork and carefully thought out theme throughout the different elements does make me feel a bit like I'm helping to build the city of Prague. One of the resources you get is eggs, and you spend the eggs to help build the road. And that ends up being important because, as the rulebook explains, the bridge over the river was made using a kind of cement in which eggs were a central ingredient. And so the king had a lot of people bringing in eggs. And so you, as a player, part of what you do is you get eggs, and that helps you work on the king's road. So lots of really interesting stuff like that throughout the game. I'm excited to try it more. That's Praga Caput Regni. Well, those are 3 games I've tried recently. Have you played any of them? Hop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know your experience playing any of these 3 games, and I would love to hear about it. One last word before I go today. My design partner and I, Rob, have a couple different times now done a board game competition called Game Fight Show, particularly a subset of Game Fight Show called March Mayhem. In March Mayhem, we set up a competition among 32 different top shelf board games to determine which is the best board game. And we do that by asking people to vote on Twitter about what they think should win. It's a very goofy show. We do kind of a kind of sports announcer voice, not unlike like a morning radio DJ or something like that. It's very silly and very fun, and I hope that you'll consider joining us. I think I will probably post the first episode of that podcast here in this stream as well, and encourage you all to go listen to that once it begins. The first episode of that is going to come out in mid-February, and it will be 3 times a week for 6 weeks. So please do consider looking for that. Or if you search for Game Fight Show as a podcast, you will find it and you can subscribe, and then you won't need to listen to it here. I'm going to put an ad for it in a few episodes coming up, so don't be surprised to hear that. Otherwise, thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. You could finish after 9 turns or go the full 15. Not 15. So if you did 3, 3, 3, and that would be 9, I guess 11 turns would be the slowest you could go. Because if you got up to 5, and then spent 3, then you get 3 more. Then you spend 3 again, get 3 more, spend 3 more again. So,
brought to you by Rattlebox Games.